All right. Thank you for joining this bonus episode of AAVMC's Diversity and Inclusion on Air. This program is devoted to promoting conversations about diversity and inclusion in veterinary medicine. On this episode, we're going to spend a bit of time with Dr. Evan Morris. Evan is a veterinarian working in Cleveland, Ohio. He's a good friend of mine, so this should be a real hoot. He's a 1968 graduate of Tuskegee School of Veterinary Medicine and has been practicing in the Cleveland area for
50, 48, almost 50 years.
Almost 50 years. So in this episode, he'll talk about his time being a veterinarian, a freedom fighter, a lifelong student, and a wonderful, wonderful friend and colleague. So this episode was filmed in his clinic in Warrensville, Ohio, while I was visiting on spring break. So without further ado, we'll just go ahead and get started. So what age were you when you decided, this is kind of the path that you wanted to take?
My goodness, Lisa, actually, my mom tells me that at about age 6, 7, 8 or so, before I could pronounce the word, people thought I wanted to be a vegetarian because I'd always say I want to be a veterinarian, but it didn't come out at 7 or 8. So my mom always said, boy, just say you want to be an animal doctor.
Okay.
So actually, when I was a young lad, when the other boys were playing baseball and basketball and football, I would head for the woods and I would catch salamanders and chipmunks and birds and frogs and toads. And so they dubbed me Nature Boy. And so it was sort of a natural pattern for me. By the time I got to high school, I became night attendant at animal hospitals. So instead of going home after school, I would go to animal hospital and I would stay there at night and take any emergency calls and change bandages and what have you through the night. And then the next morning I go back to high school and after I'd come back to the animal clinic. So that was for the last 3 or 4 years of my high school education.
Wow. So Dr. Morris is also a Richmond native, where we're both from Richmond.
Home girl.
So where'd you go to undergrad?
I went to Tuskegee, and then I left and went up to University of Virginia, and then I came back to Tuskegee, and I completed my veterinary degree at the renowned School of Veterinary Medicine at then Tuskegee Institute.
Okay, all right. So tell us about that time at Tuskegee. There's a lot going on, 60s.
Turbulent times, turbulent 60s. Actually, in Virginia, in Richmond, I had done quite a few lunch counter sit-ins. We had picketed department stores, Tallheimers and Millen Roads downtown. And so by the time I got to Tuskegee, I was sort of an activist. I came with my green army jacket and Levi's and sandals. And it just sort of accentuated as the civil rights movement got more underway because we were next to Lowndes County. And that's where the Black Panther Party had begun. And so H. Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael and Eldridge Cleaver and Malcolm X were always through campus, sort of just, we saw there was kind of when things weren't happening up north, Tuskegee was a place to kind of relax and regroup and stage. It was a staging area, actually. Okay. And of course, Dr. Martin Luther King spoke there at the chapel a few times. And so by the time the civil rights movement really got underway, one of my classmates, Sammy Young, was protesting in downtown Tuskegee, and he went to use the white bathroom and he was shot and killed. And he was actually the first college student killed in the civil rights movement. And we became very embittered after the verdict was announced that the person who shot him was found innocent. And so we marched downtown with black spray cans and painted the Confederate statue downtown black with a yellow stripe down his back and tried to pull his statue down. And boy, it was just a big hullabaloo. And of course, subsequently, the March on Montgomery, from Selma to Montgomery, got underway. And so my friend Roscoe Moore and I joined the march and participated in that march from Selma to Montgomery, 1965. The fact of the matter was that we felt that the time had come to no longer, I guess what happened actually in my case was when Martin Luther King came up with that term, beloved community, I thought, why don't I have a beloved veterinary community? And, the twin pillars being social and economic inclusion. Yeah. And so I felt then, as I feel now, that term, although it was a general term for all aspects of life and society, that a beloved veterinary community was something that I've always felt that we should embrace and to work toward in our profession, a beloved veterinary community.
Beloved veterinary community.
Yes.
So you were at Tuskegee by way of Charlottesville, from
Richmond, right? Yeah.
So how'd you end up here in Ohio?
Well, in June of 1968, when I graduated, I went to Atlanta to work with Dr. Ashley, who owned a veterinary hospital, a fellow Tuskegee alum from about class of '63 or so. And I was with him for just a few weeks, and we got a call from the dean, Dr. T.S. Williams at Tuskegee, saying that there was a veterinarian in Cleveland, Ohio, Dr. David Rickards, who was practicing in Cleveland in an area that had been essentially 100% Caucasian. But the racial mix was starting to change, and there were African Americans starting to move into that area. And he wanted to recruit a African American veterinarian. Well, he wanted number one in class, but he was going back to Puerto Rico. And so he said, well, I'll take number two in class. Well, he's going back to Africa. So he said, well, who do we have? Well, Evan Morse came up next. And so I came to Cleveland and interviewed with him. And one thing led to another, and I just decided that I much preferred to come here to Cleveland. And so upon my arrival, I just stayed at the YMCA downtown for the first couple of weeks. And then finally, Dr. Ricard said, well, look, why don't you come and just stay at my home? And he actually invited me into his home. And his son and daughter shared one bedroom, and I took the daughter's bedroom. And there I stayed for the first 6 months of my time here in Cleveland. Well, at that time, there had never been an integrated veterinary practice in Cleveland. I think I was probably the second or so African American veterinarian in the state of Ohio.
Wow.
And so the local newspapers picked up on this. And there were big newspaper articles, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, the Sun Press. So subsequently, the African American clientele in Cleveland started coming more and more in mass to his animal hospital. It was actually a business case for diversity long before that term was even coined. Because in the 4 years I was there, the clientele actually became more predominantly African American than Caucasian. So that one thing led to another. And he's now 91 years of age, and we continue to have just the most warm, intimate relationship. We talk almost daily. We consult on cases, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful relationship. Dr. David Rickards.
Truly, he is a visionary. He was certainly a visionary at that time to kind of think about the changing demographics of the city and how he could meet that need. I know I've heard him talk a bit about that. How did he think about that?
Well, he was interviewed early on by the Afro-American newspaper called him and said, we understand you have an African-American veterinarian there practicing with you in Cleveland. He said, well, can you explain to us, this was the journalist from the Afro-American paper. He said, can you explain to us why you picked an African-American veterinarian? He said, well, I don't consider people by race. They all belong to the human race. And so with that criteria in mind, he's just a humanist and just a all-encompassing, wide-thinking, global-oriented individual who just made a place for me, and I'm eternally grateful for that.
So, what was it like? I mean, you saw the clientele change, but what was those first few years like before you opened your own practice?
Let me just tell you a couple of incidents that might sort of let you know what's happened. One of my first few days in Cleveland, we had waiting room. We entered from the rear, so the client would come in from the exam room, a waiting room to the exam room, and the doctor would come in from the back. So we had a client in one of the exam rooms, and I was told to go in because it was the next appointment. But when I went in, I opened the door from the rear. There was a lady there. I think she was Italian, but she certainly was a white lady, and she had a little dog on the table. And so when I walked in, she just grabbed her dog and just wrapped up her apron and wrapped up in her and just scurried out of the door.
Oh my.
Another time I had a client with a bird, because we did a lot of exotic animals there. And so he had a minor bird. And so once again, I entered from the rear and I opened the door, and then the minor bird was sitting on the table. And the minor bird looked up and uttered the N-word about 3 times. And so the owner said, oh my goodness, doctor, I'm so sorry. I got this bird from a sailor. I had no idea he knew how to say this word. And well, we knew, and the bird said it again. So that was that minor bird, and I was never can forget some of those first few incidents. I had an Austin Healey 3000 sports car I had brought up with me from Alabama, and I came in one night, and the top was sliced, and there was a swimming pool behind the shopping center where we worked, and the N-word was just every evening when I go to my car. That's what
Yeah.
I had to deal with. This was in 1968. So,
Mm.
but Dr. Rickards supported me through all of these things, and eventually I ended up becoming a member of the Cleveland Academy of Veterinary Medicine, which was essentially closed to
Yeah.
minorities. And over the years, I eventually came from being just a member, and 10 years later, I became president of the Cleveland Academy of Veterinary Medicine.
Really speaks to the importance of sponsorship, mentoring, friendship, and good business practice too.
All of the above,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
all of the
Yeah.
above.
So when did you open this clinic?
I opened this hospital where we sit today on June 5th, 1972. I essentially decided that I wanted to follow in the footsteps of my dad, who was an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
He owned his own barbershop in Richmond, Virginia. He always taught to me the value of entrepreneurship and business ownership. And so, um, over Dr. Ricard's plea to remain with him and to form a permanent entity
Mhm.
together, I struck it on my own and came out and opened this hospital. And as I said, in 1972. And so here, 44 years later, here we stand. We've added on 1, 2, 3 additions,
Wow.
vestibule, a rear kennel, and a second floor. But we're going strong.
Yeah. I know
Going
there's a
strong.
lot of discussion now, of course, in the profession about the economics of veterinary medicine. How's business?
I'm going to the dogs. Yeah, we've had a steady incline upward.
Mhm.
What's happening here is that we have clients from 3 generations now. We have
Okay.
grandparents whose children have come, and now their children are coming. So it just makes me feel so warm and heartened to have someone come and
Mhm.
say, "Oh, Dr. Morse, my mother brought me here to you when I was 3 years old, and here I am now, and here's my puppy dog, and I've now moved to some
Uh-huh.
suburb 10 or 20 miles away, but
I'm still
they,
coming here.
they come back to see Dr.
Wow.
Morris, and it's so uplifting. It's just heartwarming.
Wow. So how many students, veterinary students who are now veterinarians probably made their way through this clinic over
Quite
40,
a
40
few, quite
years?
a few, and I keep in close contact with the
Yeah.
students who've been here and who are now veterinarians in various cities around the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
They've been here from high school and right through college, and they show me the letters of recommendation that I wrote for them for admission to veterinary school, and now they are a DVM.
PBM.
So thrilling and uplifting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're a lifelong learner. I know that you are a copious reader, but you also went back to school. It's never too late, apparently.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell us about your most recent degree from Cleveland
Okay.
State.
Well, I, as I said, I graduated from Tuskegee in 1968 with
Mm-hmm.
a doctor of veterinary medicine. Well, in 2008, I earned a master's in diversity management
Mm-hmm.
from Cleveland State University. Needless to say, I was a non-traditional student because most of the students there were younger than my daughters. And so that was quite let me say this. I had not realized some of the changes that had happened,
Mm.
um, not only locally, but internationally and globally until I became involved in the master's program. What happened was that I had actually become involved on a day-to-day basis with various diversity initiatives. I had become the chairman of the task force on diversity for the Ohio Veterinary Medical
Mm-hmm.
Association. And so I thought there was a need to put some scholarship along with my hands-on practical aspects of my day-to-day activities. And so that's what motivated me to go back and obtain a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And Cleveland State University had the only master's degree in the United States in diversity management. And so that was a 2-year program. And it just opened my eyes
Yeah.
to so many strata and levels and depth and just the total perspective of what this whole diversity undertaking initiative um, really amounts to. And what I ended up with was a new definition for diversity.
Okay.
And so the definition of diversity I came about came away with is that diversity is basically the act of thinking and acting independently together.
All right.
The act of
Uh-huh.
thinking
Thinking
and acting independently
but doing it together.
together.
Got it.
Right.
Got it. So I know a little bit about your thesis, but why don't you tell folks about your thesis? Because I think it's really, really important for people to know what they can do to help make sure that the future of the profession is more diverse.
Yeah. What I did was basically do a thorough research of all the literature that existed at that time,
Mhm.
2006, 7, 8, on diversity in veterinary medicine. And when you go to the library, we have a library here at the medical school in
Mhm.
Cleveland, and there are rows and rows of volumes of literature on diversity in human medicine, in dental medicine,
Mhm.
pharmacological medicine. But in veterinary medicine, there are about 3 or 4
Yeah.
scant, just minimal volumes of literature on veterinary medicine and diversity. And so I first did a research on what
Mhm.
existed in the literature, and then I undertook a survey of about 1,000 students. And so what the title of my thesis was Minority Student Perceptions of the Veterinary Profession. And the result of the thesis of the survey, we came away with the reasons why students, in particular minority students, would aspire to become a veterinarian.
Mhm.
And the 2 things that came out of it were, one, an acquaintanceship with a veterinarian.
Okay.
But then, secondly, and more importantly, was the uh, apprenticeship
Mhm.
or employment
Yeah. Sure.
with a veterinarian
Yeah.
or in a veterinary hospital. And those were the 2 things that the survey showed were the leading stimuli
Mhm.
toward a student of color pursuing
Pursuing.
a profession, a career in veterinary medicine. Um, the the other part of it was pet ownership.
Mm. Mhm.
And needless to
Mhm.
say, as a profession, we want to encourage pet ownership,
Sure.
but it was
Sure.
also shown to be one of the stimuli toward making
Mhm.
a decision to pursue a career
Yeah.
in veterinary medicine.
But imagine that those three things are really important together because owning a pet doesn't necessarily mean accessing veterinary care. We would like it to, and we promote it to,
Well,
um, but the ability to actually have a relationship with a veterinarian is really important. Knowing veterinarians and seeing some that look like you are really important.
well, you need a critical mass,
Yeah.
and most minorities have never seen a minority veterinarian, and so that's a sort of conundrum
Hmm.
that we have to approach even to this
Yeah.
day. I also made a proposal that, as I think about it and talking with you, I came up with a idea of what I call pets and vets, which was to start off with veterinarians visiting inner
Yeah.
school systems and having pets with them, be it a bunny rabbit or a
Yeah.
turtle or a kitten or a puppy, and let the students see and feel and touch and just have physical contact with these
Yeah.
pets and have the veterinarian there physically in the space to let students see a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And a lot of the inner city school systems and what have you here, the students have never seen a veterinarian. I
Yeah.
mean, they have dogs and cats and all, but they don't get veterinary care. We started a free animal clinic
Uh-huh.
back in '76, Dr. Rickards and I. And so periodically, and for some years, it was on a quarterly basis, we would go into the inner city areas and we would treat pets at absolutely no charge. And that's been one of the most uplifting and
Mm.
thrilling programs. We
Yeah.
continue to do that to this day.
Sure. Sure.
Free Animal Clinic of Cleveland.
That's the Free Animal Clinic of Cleveland. All
Mhm.
right, good deal. I'll have to get information about that for to make
I
sure that
would
we
be
include at the end of
delighted.
the show. And in fact,
Delighted.
our May episode of the Diversity and Inclusion on Air podcast will be featuring Dr. Blackwell. Michael
Okay,
Blackwell. And
sure.
one of the things
Good.
that we'll be talking about is access to veterinary medical care because there are a number of barriers, and it really is something that the profession has to kind of think about and tackle. You can't expect the folks that need the help to
Yeah.
you know, they need to kind of, you know, they want to access it, but really the heavy lift has to come from the profession in terms of thinking about how to reduce those barriers.
Yeah, and at each and every animal clinic, free animal clinic, we have students or they have parents will actually come up to us and say, you know, I've never thought about my child pursuing a career in veterinary medicine. Would it be okay if they would come out and shadow you and
great.
spend some time with you? So a lot of Saturdays, we have students who, because of the free animal clinics, have seen veterinary medicine as a viable career option, and they come out and they spend this Saturday with me and spring break sometime.
All right.
So it's a win-win situation.
Sure.
Positive all the way.
Sure. Well, there's always kids that are really, really interested. Unfortunately, my daughter, we've spent a couple of days with Dr. Morse,
right?
And I think 1 hour in the clinic, and my daughter said, "This is not for me."
She was fine with the furry pets.
She was fine with the furry pets, not the
scaly
scaly ones.
We had reptiles, right? And so I think that sort of put a halt to her any aspirations she might have had in that direction.
Sure.
But the furry ones were okay.
The furry ones were okay.
Right. She was great. And I'm still working on her, by the way.
Okay. We're still working on it.
Right.
Okay.
I haven't given up.
So tell us now, and kind of looking back over all of these years and looking forward, why is diversity and inclusion important?
Well, the fact of the matter is this country is undergoing a profound and just a revolutionary change in the racial makeup. And, you know, statistics show that probably around 2040, depending on what survey you look at, certainly by 2050, this country will be majority people of color. And the statistics in the veterinary profession now, I mean, there's just a woeful inadequacy of veterinarians of color. I mean, I think probably the latest statistical analysis that I saw was about 9 out of 10 veterinarians are, maybe it's changed a little by now, but probably, you know, upwards of 85–90% of the profession is white. And with the population shift changing now, in order to render culturally appropriate veterinary care, we need to have people of color in the profession, because if you're going to have a profession that is, I mean, as I see it right now, 2% minority in the population of people of color, African Americans, you know, 12% or so. There's a disparity in numbers, and I just think the profession should be open, inclusive. There should be sisterhood and brotherhood in veterinary medicine at all levels and respects.
Sure. Let's talk a bit about what we mean by culturally relevant or sensitive care, because I think that kind of trips people up in kind of understanding. I think that many people kind of potentially understand what that means in human health, but they don't necessarily make the connection in animal medicine. So can we talk a little bit about what we mean by that?
Sure. I mean, for instance, we have a client who come in and say a Hispanic client will come in. Well, they have a sort of a family approach to the presenting pet. So, and rather than talking to one family member, in the waiting room, you may have 4, 5, or 6 family members. And so there's a give and take where I'm talking to one family member, but pretty soon I have to bring in the whole family and we have to sit down and have, because that's just the manner that they're culturally that they're accustomed to making decisions. And so, I mean, those things, and then of course we could African American, we have to be, you know, culturally appropriate in our recommendations and our care and the things that we render toward the pet. You have to bear in mind the owner's culture.
And taking time to really kind of say, okay, this might be where we want you to get in terms of the standard of care, but there might be some steps.
It doesn't happen overnight because there's too many years of cultural tradition behind it to just overnight make a quick, you know, getting up to a certain level that we want to get to, but you have to be slow and take your time on a cultural basis to reach that stage.
And I know that a lot of you're I guess just down the road from Amish country, and I've heard a lot of veterinarians talk about some of the unique challenges. So this isn't just a people of color issue, but really kind of real cultural rooting things where
that's why we say culturally appropriate, not racially appropriate.
Right? So there's some
Right.
unique opportunities, but also unique challenges in terms of working with different kinds of communities.
And I speak with a lot of the veterinarians out in the Amish country out there. And so you're exactly right.
Yeah.
They have to be culturally appropriate in that level also.
Yeah. So tell us for students, young people that may be considering a career in veterinary medicine, current students in the that are in the schools that watch the podcast, and there are a lot of them that watch the podcast. What do you want them to know? One, about veterinary medicine as your career, and two, specifically about diversity and inclusion in veterinary medicine.
I want them to know that I, along with many other veterinarians, and I'm not saying specifically me, but we know what it's like to be an outsider. And we know that there is, let's just say that it's not an unreachable goal to become a veterinarian. And I never thought I would be able to become a veterinarian. I mean, coming from a sort of a inner city area in Richmond, Virginia, where we were third floor apartment, and my mother's a domestic worker, my father's a barber, and not having any wherewithal, to aspire toward becoming a veterinarian. If I was able to make it, these students, by pulling themselves up by their own bootstrap and getting the commitment and the strength and the perseverance and the drive and motivation to do it, it's an attainable goal. I mean, we all get here on bridges built by others, and I hope that I can be a bridge to have others cross to come into profession just as I was able to do. And I'm here to, in any way, undergird, uplift, enhance, motivate, help in any fashion I can, night or day.
Good deal. And so what about your colleagues? What would you want them to know, specifically really about where the profession should go with respect to diversity and inclusion?
Interesting question. When I was in elementary school, Sputnik was launched in 1954. And at that time, in the inner school system that I was in Richmond, Virginia, Albert Norrell School, all of a sudden, all of our teachers started telling us that, the world's changing rapidly now, space, Sputnik, and that we, as people of color here, we have to join this revolutionary changes undertaking, but that it's incumbent on us that there's going to be a double standard we'll be facing, and that we have to conduct ourselves with the utmost in excellence and to be just a bit higher than the other classes of people, because we're going to be judged on a double standard. And so we always have to be, if we're going to get 98 on a test, let's take it up to 99, 100, because, you have to be better than. And so that's always been a motivating force with me, excellence. And so my colleagues here in the Cleveland area, the veterinarians, they've watched me, and they know that the quality of medicine that I practice is on a level with any professional practice here, not only in Cleveland, but anywhere in the United States, because we have a high standard of excellence. And I'm truly a Tuskegee veterinarian, and we were motivated and trained there to be the utmost in professionalism, excellence, and highest quality of veterinary medicine.
All right, good deal. Wonderful. Parting words. What do you want the world to know?
My dad always told me, and he only went to about the 8th grade or so, and he had a barber shop in the country. In fact, there's his barber chair we're looking at there. But he always told me my motto, and many, many, many times he repeated it, and it's held me on a high level and kept me sustained all of these years. He always said to me, boy, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And so that's what I would like to say. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can.
All right. It's a good word. It's a good word. So with that, we will wrap up the special bonus edition of Diversity and Inclusion on Air. I'd like to thank Dr. Morris, Evan, a good personal friend of mine, colleague, friend, family.
What about a hug?
And this has been great. My time in Cleveland has been great the last couple of days, and I'm just delighted that we were able to make this happen before I left. So thank you.
I'm honored and delighted.
Thank you. Thank you. So I will be adding some resources as usual to the end of this episode. So stay tuned. Please be sure to tune in on April 11th for the next formal episode 7, I believe, of Diversity and Inclusion on Air, featuring Galen Sanderlin from UC Davis. And we'll be talking about sexual orientation, gender identity, and the job search. So you don't want to miss that, especially if you are a senior and looking for post-graduation employment. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.